Junior doctors are set for further strikes. Their union is warning they'll walk out for 5 days in less than a fortnight.
This is devastating news for patients. Perhaps 100,000 operations will now have to be cancelled. Around 1 million hospital appointments will have to be postponed, causing worry, distress and anxiety for families up and down the country.
Also tonight, May insists no fudge on Brexit. The numbers coming to Britain from Europe will be controlled.
2 members of a family are dead and 3 more injured after a police car chase in South London.
And a breakthrough in the fight against Alzheimer's, the drug that could stop the early onset of the disease in its tracks.
This is the ITV Evening News with Mary Nightingale and Alistair Stewart.
Good evening. England's junior doctors tonight launched a major escalation of their bitter dispute with the government over new contracts. They have announced a 5-day strike that will start on Monday, September the 12th. And they are warning of a rolling programme of similar walkouts.
The Department of Health tonight accused doctors of playing politics with vulnerable patients. Smaller strikes earlier this year forced the cancellation of thousands of operations and appointments, and it comes at a time when the NHS is under pressure like never before, as our health editor Rachel Younger reports.
Save our NHS! Save our NHS!
After a 5-month lull in hostilities, the strikes are back. Waiting times are up, services are being suspended, and now this. The question is whether it's an irresponsible gamble with patients' lives or an inevitable reaction to mounting pressure on the NHS.
The situation is due to the government's concept or manifesto pledge of a 7-day NHS, which they have proven that they have not costed, they've not funded it, they've not staffed it, and more important than anything else, they've not shown any evidence that actually it would work.
Already, the strikes of the past year have led to over 37,000 cancelled operations. The last strike alone, over 2 days in April, saw well over 112,000 outpatient appointments postponed. And remember, the NHS in England hasn't hit its 18-week waiting time target since February. For the Health Secretary, it's a disaster.
This is devastating news for patients. Perhaps 100,000 operations will now have to be cancelled. Around 1 million hospital appointments will have to be postponed, causing worry, distress and anxiety for families up and down the country.
But it comes alongside more protests, this time from patients. These campaigners unable to stop today's decision to downgrade Horton's maternity department in Oxfordshire to a midwife-led unit. The Trust says it can't find enough junior doctors to run it.
The bottom line is that having gone through 4 rounds of recruitment, we are still nowhere near being able to run a fully staffed, safe rota.
But Joanne Humphrey, whose placenta ruptured during a supposedly routine birth at Horton last year, says a transfer to Oxford's John Radcliffe Hospital would have killed her.
I think I would have died en route to the JR. Honest answer. Or my baby would have died and they would have saved me. But one or the other, I really don't think we both would be here.
Suspensions, strikes, with summer drawing to an end, the NHS is braced for a stormy winter ahead.
So, Rachel, how will the NHS cope with a 5-day strike then?
Well, make no mistake, it is going to be far from easy. It was very clear from talking to managers and chief executives during the last round of industrial action that when it became really difficult was when these strikes were cumulative. You'll remember back in April there was a 48-hour strike, and trying to get consultants to cover that kind of period and look after the gaps left by junior doctors as well as filling their own roles is where things really become very painful. This too is a full withdrawal of labour. That means A&E departments are involved, and as the evidence has shown, as the investigation we did last week showed, those areas are being very hard hit by staff shortages as it is. So whether you believe these strikes are a symptom or indeed one of the causes of the problems the NHS is facing, we are in for a very difficult few months ahead. OK, Rachel Younger in Oxford, thank you.
Theresa May said today she wants a tailor-made Brexit deal for Britain and, crucially, one that will include controls on immigration from countries remaining in the European Union.
She summoned her cabinet to Chequers and confirmed there would be no second referendum, nor indeed any chance for MPs to reject the result. But as our political correspondent Carl Dinnan reports, the meeting was also about uniting the Conservative Party.
Theresa May led her ministers to Chequers for an end-of-summer cabinet away day. And amidst the 16th century splendour of the Prime Minister's country residence, she made clear there was no question that Britain is on the way out of the EU.
We'll be looking at the next steps that we need to take, but we'll also be looking at the opportunities that are now open to us. We must continue to be very clear that Brexit means Brexit, that we're going to make a success of it. That means there's no second referendum, no attempts to sort of stay in the EU by the back door. We're actually going to deliver on this.
Seated beside her, the Cabinet Secretary. His predecessor says this is one of the biggest jobs in living memory.
It involves negotiations covering all government departments. It will affect all of our lives. So this is probably one of the biggest challenges that the civil service and our government have faced certainly in my lifetime.
The Cabinet did make some decisions today about what Brexit means. They would seek additional controls on immigration from the EU, but also what they call a positive outcome for those who wish to trade. And there'd be no need for a parliamentary vote on triggering Article 50, the formal process of leaving the EU. But the Cabinet is just as divided as the party on how much free market access Britain needs to negotiate.
We need that access to the single market. I also want us to have the free movement of labour because I believe in the positive advantages of immigration.
We don't need to negotiate very much at all. We wish to take back control. We want to control our own borders, spend our own money, make our own laws outside the trade area. And so we just do that.
Theresa May not only has to set the direction for Brexit, she also needs to persuade her colleagues to take that journey with her. But of course, uniting the party around a strategy is one thing. Delivering it with the rest of Europe is another thing altogether. And they may say this idea of Britain restricting freedom of movement whilst also keeping free trade as rather akin to the UK both having its gâteau and eating it. And they may have something to say about that.
Carl Dinnan at Chequers, thank you.
The family of a Polish factory worker killed in a suspected race hate attack tonight paid tribute to him, saying he was a hard-working man and they are devastated. Arkadiusz Jóźwik was attacked by a gang of teenagers in Harlow in Essex at the weekend. Today, the Polish ambassador visited the scene and said there'd been an increase in xenophobia following the EU referendum. From Essex, Angus Walker reports.
Paying his respects to the victim of a killing which has shocked his nation. The Polish ambassador in Harlow, Essex, at the scene of a crime which is raising difficult questions for Britain.
And I'm really shocked and deeply concerned on this tragedy. It's a great tragedy not only for Polish community but also for British community.
Arkadiusz Jóźwik was killed after a violent attack on Saturday night. 6 teenagers have been arrested and bailed. Eric Hind knew Arkadiusz. He's convinced his friend was targeted because he was Polish.
We are not welcome here anymore. We've been given lots of kind of, sarcastic comments.
Like what?
Like, what time's your next bus? As I mentioned before, have you got a valid passport? This is just one of the outcomes. It shouldn't happen. Arek shouldn't die the way he died.
The Polish ambassador leaving a private meeting with the brother of Arkadiusz Jóźwik at the police station, where the murder investigation is ongoing into the death of a Polish man, which is raising deep concerns about life for European immigrants in post-Brexit Britain. Well, the family of Arkadiusz Jóźwik has just released a statement saying we're all extremely devastated at the sad loss of our brother, son and uncle, and a vigil is due to be held here within the hour. Local people very keen to demonstrate that the vast majority of people in this town live together perfectly peacefully side by side. A march is also planned for Saturday. Was this a hate crime? Well, that's for the police and legal system to decide. But the fact that that question is being asked is very troubling in a community with such a high concentration of people from Eastern Europe.
Angus, thank you.
A body has been recovered from Didcot power station today, 6 months after the partial collapse of the building during demolition work. Police say the families of 3 men missing since the collapse in February have been informed. The body has not yet been formally identified.
A woman and a boy have been killed after a car being chased by police mounted a pavement and crashed into a family. 3 girls also suffered multiple injuries in the incident and have been taken to hospital. It happened in Penge in South London this afternoon, and Duncan Golestani is there for us tonight. Duncan, what have witnesses been saying?
Well, the people who came rushing to help describe what they saw as complete carnage. A group of 5, at least 5, possibly a family, walking along what is a quiet street here in South London when a black Ford ploughed into them. Now, that car had been reported stolen and was being chased by 2 police vehicles when it mounted the pavement going into the group. You might be able to see from this amateur video that people around here, neighbours and witnesses, they rushed to help and tried desperately to lift up the car in order to get to the children who were underneath. But 1 woman died, as well as 1 young boy. 3 more girls were taken to hospital. Here's what one witness told us.
I saw from Penge Cafe, I see the car getting chased through Queen Adelaide. Time I walk round with my dog, I see the person getting resuscitated.
Now, the driver of the car, a 23-year-old man, has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving and theft of a motor vehicle. He's being questioned by the police. And because the police were involved in this, the police watchdog, the Independent Police Complaints Commission, is also investigating.
Duncan, thank you.
Still to come on the ITV Evening News. The pedal-powered Paralympian who's on the road to Rio.
And remembering the Allied soldiers who braved horrendous conditions on the Arctic Convoy 75 years ago. Those stories and more after the break. Welcome back. Hopes of a long-awaited treatment for Alzheimer's have been raised after promising results from a new drug trial. It works by clearing away brain proteins associated with the early onset of the disease. A leading Alzheimer's charity cautiously welcomed the findings, which suggest the drugs can halt the condition. Juliet Bremner has the details.
Joy Watson was diagnosed with Alzheimer's on her 55th birthday. Today's announcement that a drug which may halt the progress of the disease is a possibility gives her and husband Tony renewed hope.
There's so much change, so much you have to adapt to. If there'd been a drug available when I was first diagnosed, I would have been jumping for joy, and so would my family, because we were all aware of what the future would hold.
So tell me about the DMAN.
This is only the start of the trial process, but at the Alzheimer's Research Discovery Drug Centre, staff believe it's the most important step towards finding a treatment for more than a decade. Alzheimer's disease is linked to a build-up of a sticky protein in the brain called beta-amyloid peptide, which is believed to be the primary cause of memory loss and a decline in cognitive function. The drug aducanumab works by shrinking this protein and so slowing mental decline. It isn't a cure. As Dr. David Reynolds explained, it won't help those with moderate or advanced Alzheimer's, but that doesn't diminish the significance of aducanumab.
We don't have any drugs that can slow down or stop those diseases. So if this drug works, then it will be the first what's called disease-modifying drug to come forward. So something that can actually slow down the disease. That is a really major step forward.
By 2025, dementia could affect more than 1 million people in the UK. Today's findings are the best hope of limiting their suffering. Juliet Bremner, ITV News.
Donald Trump is to meet Mexico's president later, having previously described Mexican migrants as rapists and murderers. It comes ahead of a speech by the Republican presidential candidate on how he plans to tackle illegal immigration. Mr. Trump has pledged to build a wall between the border between the two countries.
Africa's elephant population has declined by 30%, mainly due to poaching. A continent-wide census found that even in protected areas, many savanna elephants are being slaughtered for their tusks.
Now, the latest in our series looking at some of the inspiring Britons going for gold at next week's Paralympics. Now, 3 years ago, Megan Gilia had a sudden stroke which left her partially paralysed. She took up cycling as part of her recovery and became so successful she's already double world champion. But as Sally Lockwood reports, it's been far from a smooth ride. Megan's had to overcome some extraordinary hurdles to be ready for Rio.
Speed, focus, balance. All that takes twice the energy for Megan Gilia. Because what you can't easily see is the injury to her brain.
Come on, Megan. Real positive weight movement.
If the normal brain has a full battery, someone with a head injury generally starts their day off on half a battery.
At 27 years old, a severe stroke threw Megan's world into chaos. She lost the use of her right side and was diagnosed with epilepsy. She still lives with countless side effects, including memory, speech and vision loss. Her relationship broke down and she had to start a new life emotionally as well as physically.
You go into a very dark area where you think, what's the point in life? If the people you care about the most can't cope, then how are you meant to cope? And I needed that belief in myself again.
A key step in Megan's recovery was getting on a bike, at first having to strap her hand and foot to the frame.
Every step I take, I have to think about lifting my foot up and putting it down. By the end of a block of training, I've potentially had 3 or 4 seizures. I'm just sleeping all the time. I'm just tired.
So this is your stash room?
This is a stash.
It's hard to believe Megan was a spectator at London 2012 and in full health. Now, just 3 years after her stroke, she's packed for Rio.
It still hasn't sunk in until I use it.
For Megan, her condition is a daily gamble.
How are you feeling, Megan? Knackered, absolutely knackered.
This is just her second training session after 3 weeks in hospital.
Some days I can be walking fine, maybe, and just look like I've got a limp. Other days I'm on a crutch, 2 crutches. I have to use like a kid's push scooter to get me around some days. And then there's other days where I'm in a wheelchair.
Megan's unpredictable condition can change everything on race day. Nothing, though, can knock her determination.
If I had my way, I'd want 4 golds. I think anyone competing in 4 events would want 4 golds. People will see that, actually, no matter what you go through, there is always a positive that can be found.
The inspirational Megan Gilia on her hopes for Rio.
And finally, the bravery and sacrifice of Allied sailors who delivered vital supplies to the Soviet Union during World War II's darkest days was remembered today. Thousands died from constant Nazi attacks and the freezing conditions off the northern coast of Russia.
Today, Princess Anne joined veterans in Archangel to mark the 75th anniversary of the first Arctic convoy. Paul Davis reports.
It was a day when Russia remembered its debt to brave British sailors. The Princess Royal, a guest at the home of the Russian fleet, along with some of those who ran that deadly gauntlet. It was known as the Murmansk Run, the Arctic convoys who battled through heavy seas and Nazi submarines to bring supplies to a starving Russia. More than 3,000 Allied seamen perished. Churchill called it the most dangerous journey in the world.
Pretty grim. It makes you think life is pretty short.
Now 90, Ken Robinson counts himself lucky to have survived. As a 17-year-old wireless operator, Ken often found himself on watch.
I was above deck.
You were?
Up at the top. So everything that's happening. Those I've seen go down, they would just tipple over and go down stern first, usually with the bow sticking up. The thing was, of course, that if anyone went in the water, they couldn't live for more than a minute.
That cold?
Yes, well, it's 40 below.
Russia's thank you to veterans like Ken was delayed by the Cold War, but now the old sailors have Russia's highest honour.
I think it's quite fantastic.
The Anglo-Russian relationship has often been strained, but in respect for the Arctic convoy heroes, there is no disagreement. Paul Davis, ITV News.
Respect indeed, as Paul said. That is it for now. Tom Bradbury will be here with news at 10.
Apart from all the team here on the Evening News. Have a great evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.